The log is missing, and that is not an accident. Mara Vance has one job: pass deep range certification and get proof to Earth. The station has days to label her a hazard, wipe the record, and lock the truth behind protocol. The question is simple. Can she transmit the evidence before the array files her as the problem? Mara Vance stood on the marked circle, and the air turned brittle around her. A neutral voice flowed from overhead. Candidate Mara Vance. Thermal descent in progress. Maintain position. Cold arrived in layers. It hit skin first. Then it reached joints. Then it pressed behind the eyes, warning her to move or lose control. Across the chamber, Toric Vale watched without blinking. His badge read Senior Standardization Officer. His posture looked like a rule made human. Mara kept her breathing even. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. She moved in slow circles to keep blood moving. Condensation formed on metal, then crystallized. She did not trust the display. She trusted what the room did. If the array wanted her to fail, it would not do it loudly. It would do it with clean records. That thought struck hard. Why would a validation station care about records more than bodies? Her goal was simple, and it was not only survival. She had to pass deep range certification. She also had to pull proof for Earth. If the station labeled her a hazard, the file would close fast. It would close in days, not weeks. Then Earth would be signed into someone else's conclusion. The cold kept dropping. Mara shortened her stride and worked her shoulders. She flexed her fingers, then relaxed them. She refused to give clumsiness time to arrive. A soft chime sounded. Warden line, transition, Toric said. Transition acknowledged, Warden line replied. Thermal ascent and pressure modulation in progress. Heat climbed too fast to feel natural. Pressure shifted in subtle waves. Mara felt her ears pop, then pop again. It felt like the room was testing seals inside her skull. She stopped walking and chose stillness. Movement now would waste water. She loosened her collar, pulled hair off her neck, and kept her breathing shallow. Toric leaned toward his side console. His fingers moved faster. A log window opened. His eyes tracked across it and halted. He was no longer watching her. He was watching the system. Warden line, Toric said, confirms sensor integrity. Sensor integrity. Nominal, Warden line replied. Candidate vitals within expected deviation. Toric tapped again. The log remained. In the middle of a timeline, a segment was missing. It was not static. It was not noise. It was a clean blank space. Mara saw the angle of his shoulders change. Control stayed on his face. Confidence shifted into caution. How do you feel? He asked. Mara waited one beat. Hot, she said. And awake. Warden line. In sequence, Toric said. Sequence 1 concluded, Warden line replied. Thermal normalization in progress. The heat fell with engineered speed. Air cooled. Pressure settled. Ordinary returned, which here meant only less lethal. Mara stepped out into the corridor. Her skin prickled as sweat dried too quickly. She did not stumble. Toric walked beside her now instead of ahead. It was a small change. Small changes were how stations admitted something had shifted. There was a discontinuity in the operational record, he said. Eyes forward. That sounds like your problem, Mara replied. It becomes your problem if you are the discontinuity, Toric said. Mara kept her face neutral. I stood in a circle. I breathed. I did not edit your logs. Toric did not answer. The station light stayed flat and even. That made the silence feel louder. Hours earlier, she had arrived through a docking ring that looked too perfect to trust. The shuttle drifted in so smoothly, she felt guided into place. The lock engaged with a soft thud. A clean vibration traveled through the seat and ended. No groan of stress. No lingering grated. The Asterion Validation Array on Kestrel 9 received her like a machine accepting a part. Beyond the airlock, the intake corridor was bright enough to flatten shadows. The floor had texture that resisted slipping. It also resisted scuffs, as if the place refused proof that anyone walked here. The walls curved in a way that denied corners. There were no alcoves, no dead space, no privacy by accident. A tall figure waited at the far end, posture rigid and calm. His badge read Toric Vale. The insignia marked him as Senior Standardization Officer. He looked once at Mara, then at the slim case by her side. His gaze flicked to the vitals patch on her wrist. "You are Mara Vance," he said. "I am," she replied. His eyes narrowed by a fraction. Origin listed as Earth. Mara nodded once. Earth candidates rarely apply for deep range certification, Torek said. Your file suggests your home environment is unsuitable for extended duty. Then the file is missing something, Mara said. Torek did not smile. The array does not reward surprises. It records them. He turned and walked. Doors opened a heartbeat before he reached them. The station knew his pace. Mara followed at a measured distance, studying ceiling seams and lens housings. On Earth, cameras hid to avoid resentment. Here, optics were an argument. A neutral voice flowed from overhead. Candidate Mara Vance. Intake verification in progress. Please maintain forward motion. Torek did not look up. Warden line, he said, as if acknowledging a tool. Welcome to the Asterion Validation Array, the voice replied. Your assigned route is optimal. Mara watched her own marker appear on a wall display above an operations floor. It was tagged with her name. It moved in exact alignment with the corridor beneath. Technicians worked in clean lines. The station gave off the pressure of a place that had never forgiven a mistake. In a small assessment room, a cuff scanned her wrist. A medical technician asked routine questions in a tone that made them ledger entries. No implants, Mara said. No medications, the technician confirmed. No conditions that would make altered atmosphere unsafe, the technician asked. If you mean panic, no, Mara said. Torek stood in the doorway. Your baseline will be established, he said. You will comply with directions. You will not deviate from authorized spaces. Mara rose when released. Where do we start? Torek tapped the console. A route illuminated on the wall. Thermal shear bay. Now, after the missing log and the too calm voice, Mara felt the station shift. It stopped evaluating. It started measuring for containment. Later, the array assigned her a narrow bunk room. Everything inside looked new, even the air. A wall panel displayed directives about rest, hydration, and compliance. It treated her body like another system needing a checklist. Mara waited until corridor noise softened into artificial night. She lay still until her pulse settled. Then she rose and opened the sealed kit on the desk. Inside was a thin polymer strip and a compact device no larger than 2 fingers. Ghost pin tap, Terran issue, built to look harmless. Her wrist patch pulsed once. It was a silent acknowledgement from the Terran Strategic Liaison Office. No voice came, only the signal that she was not alone. Mara slipped on her boots and approached the door. Warden line, she said softly, testing, lights to night mode. Night mode is active, Warden line replied. The overhead light shifted by a fraction. It stayed bright enough to betray a breath. Mara kept her expression steady and stepped into the corridor. She walked the authorized loop for several turns. She let Sentinel Grid learn a pattern it could predict. Then she knelt by a maintenance panel and moved as if adjusting her boot. Her fingers found the seam. The panel opened with a quiet release. She slipped into the service crawl and closed it behind her. The crawl space was cooler and smelled faintly of active electronics. Thin light strips ran along the edges. They were just enough to keep a worker from falling. Conduits and cable bundles lined the passage like veins. Mara moved low and careful. She chose each contact point to avoid sound. At a marked service node, she exposed a data trunk, insulated and thick. She pressed the ghost pin tap into place. A green dot blinked once, then disappeared. Passive. Quiet. Listening. Mara advanced through the service crawl toward a secondary junction. It brushed the log vault's outer arteries. She did not need the vault door. She needed what leaked around it. She opened a junction box and ran a filament lead from the tap. A directory tree flickered on the tiny display. Most branches were locked. One label held shape. Reclassification dossier 12. It sat behind a signature set that did not match the Asterion Compliance Bureau. The header carried a different stamp, a corporate glyph she recognized. Ordnance Consortium. Mara closed the junction box with deliberate care. She did not reach for the file. Not tonight. A low tone vibrated through the crawl space. It was not an alarm. It was a state change. The thin light strips brightened by a fraction. Warden Line spoke, faint through the metal. Anomalous thermal variance detected. Mara froze. Her wrist patch pulsed twice, then went silent. The Terran line had cut, either by protocol or by force. Mara backed away from the junction and moved deeper into the service crawl. She chose a route toward louder machinery. There, her noise could vanish. Behind her, a panel somewhere scraped open. A beam of light swept through the access corridor she used minutes ago. Warden Line spoke again, calm as ever. Candidate, Mara Vance, please remain in assigned quarters. Mara did not answer. She slid behind insulated coolant lines and held still, breathing slow. Metal pressed into her shoulder. Coolant throbbed through pipes with steady pressure. Footsteps passed overhead, measured and close. A muffled voice spoke to the station, professional and flat. Confirm track, the voice said. Track is probable, not certain, Warden Line replied. Sentinel grid indicates recent displacement. The footsteps moved on. The beam of light faded. The crawl space remained too bright for comfort. Mara stayed still until the station's weight shifted back into routine. Then she crawled again, away from the access point. Away from her room. Away from any path the system could guess. The array had stopped treating her like a candidate. It was treating her like a problem to be contained. Mara Vance woke with her throat still raw from respirator fumes. The ceiling lights never dimmed. Her sense of morning came from the station's quieter cadence. She pressed 2 fingers to her wrist patch and felt nothing but cool polymer. Warden Line spoke as soon as her door unlocked. Candidate Mara Vance. Report to Atmospheric Compliance Hall. Mara walked the corridor at the same pace she used yesterday. She gave Sentinel Grid nothing new. A wall display tracked her as a moving dot, clean and precise. The array did not watch like a person. It watched like an audit. Torek Vale waited at the hall entrance. His eyes flicked to Mara's boots, then to her face. He searched for a sign of last night's detour. He offered none of the station's synthetic warmth. Your next evaluation begins now, he said. Inside, several adult candidates stood on marked pads. Their equipment varied by body plan, but their posture matched. Tight shoulders, forced stillness, the look of people bargaining with their lungs. A technician handed Mara a marrow respirator. When she lifted it, a sweet chemical bite rose from the intake. It was sharp enough to sting her eyes. New plastic did not smell like that. Mara turned the canister and studied the seam. This filter was swapped, she said. Torek kept his voice flat. It is certified. It smells like solvent, Mara said. Certified by who? Warden Line interrupted before Torek could answer. Atmospheric adaptation begins. Equipment compliance is mandatory. Mara sealed the respirator. The odor bloomed inside the mask. She breathed shallow and slow. She kept her tongue against the roof of her mouth to resist coughing. If the filter was wrong, coughing would feed it. Hypoxia ramp starts now, Warden Line said. Pressure shifted. Oxygen fell by small steps. At first it was subtle. Then it became a heaviness behind Mara's eyes. An irritant joined the air, dry and cutting. Across the hall, a candidate's breathing grew loud and fast. Another candidate swayed and grabbed the rail. Medics hovered close, hands ready. Mara tested her mask seal with a firm press. It held. Her eyes still stung. The irritant was getting through the filter. She lifted her hand, 2 fingers raised, and spoke through the mask. Torek, your filter is compromised. Torek stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her vitals. Remain on pad. Mara kept breathing slow. Someone wants this to look like me failing procedure. Torek turned to his console and pulled the supply log. His fingers stopped mid-motion, the same sudden stillness from yesterday. A segment of the record was missing. A clean gap sat where a replacement entry should have been. A warning light flared outside the hall window. It was not in the chamber. It was in the corridor beyond. Warden Line's tone sharpened. Containment deviation detected. Initiate redlock protocol. The hall door slammed shut. Vents surged with a hard hiss. Air pushed faster than the test schedule required. Someone shouted from the far end. A technician's voice carried real fear. "We have a leak in the intake corridor." A candidate collapsed. Their knees folded as if bolts had been removed. Another candidate clawed at respirator straps, eyes wide. Medics moved in, but the vent surge drove irritant straight across the pads. Mara stepped off her marker. She dragged the nearest fallen candidate toward the center, away from the strongest airflow. The candidate's chest hammered against the suit. Their hands shook as they fought to keep the seal. "Slow breaths," Mara said. "Do not rip the mask." Torek snapped. "Get back on your pad." Mara looked at him, then at the vents. "End it. This is not controlled." Torek keyed commands. Warden line answered. "Redlock protocol is active. Movement is restricted." Torek leaned in, voice low and lethal. "Reduce airflow. Now." The vent surge eased to a lower flow. The air still burned, but it stopped shoving people toward collapse. Outside the window, sealed response teams rolled scrubber units into the corridor, fast and coordinated. When the doors finally released, the hall smelled of hot metal and chemical residue. Torek stared at Mara's respirator canister, then at his console. "That corridor line was not scheduled," he said. Mara pulled the mask off and drew cleaner air that still tasted wrong. "Then someone scheduled it without you." Torek did not deny it. Medical screening. Then mass deck. Mass deck felt different the moment Mara entered. The hum behind the walls was deeper. It settled into teeth and bones. Field generators did not care what you believed. They only cared what mass you carried. Adult candidates lined up again, fewer than before. Some wore joint braces. Some had fresh medical tape on their hands. No one joked. Everyone looked ready to negotiate with gravity. Torek Vale faced them with hands clasped behind his back. "Incremental load. Use signal before failure. We stop before injury becomes permanent." Warden line spoke. "Mass deck calibration complete. Begin exposure." The floor pulled down. At first it was manageable, like moving with a heavy pack. Mara widened her stance and bent her knees. She let bones take alignment and muscles take control. She kept breathing through her nose to spare her throat. A chime sounded. The pull increased. One candidate grunted and shifted. Another candidate's knees trembled, then steadied. Their breathing grew louder. The rhythm of strain spread through the line. Mara moved in a small pattern, not showy. "Brace, exhale, reset." She kept her eyes on a fixed point. Another chime. Gravity climbed again. A candidate dropped to one knee and raised a trembling hand. A medic stepped in and guided them to a rail. Another candidate tried to stay standing, then folded forward. Their arms caught the floor too late. Mara felt compression settle into hips and spine. It was not just weight. It was a demand that every tendon hold position under a force that wanted to shorten you. Torek watched candidates, then checked his panel. His attention returned to the system more often than to Mara. He was looking for the same kind of gap. Warden line announced, "Increase load." The field tightened. Mara's thighs burned. Her pulse thudded behind her ears. She controlled the urge to gasp. Gasping wasted oxygen. It also betrayed panic. A candidate at the far end collapsed with a short, sharp cry. Medics moved fast, practiced. This place handled failure as routine. Mara felt her own limit approach. As a quiet warning. Her hands tingled. Her vision narrowed at the edges. She shortened her stance and tightened her core. She turned her body into one locked structure. She raised her hand. It was not surrender. It was a signal that she was close. Torek stepped forward. "Hold," Torek said. Warden line answered, "Hold is not scheduled." Torek repeated, louder, "Hold." The generators whined. The floor pulsed. For an instant, gravity spiked higher than the step allowed. Mara's knees buckled. Her right wrist slammed into the floor to catch her weight. Pain shot up her forearm. She bit down hard and forced air out, then drew a controlled inhale. The spike vanished as quickly as it came. Load dropped back as if nothing happened. Mara pushed upright, wrist trembling. "That was a shove," she said. Torek stared at his panel. The record showed a jump and a correction with no explanation. It was a clean glitch, too tidy. "In the run." Torek ordered. Wardenline replied. Run will continue unless failure criteria are met. Torek's fingers moved across the console. Override. Generators eased down in slow stages. Candidates who still stood sagged with relief. Medics helped those on the floor into seated braces. Mara sat against a rail and flexed her wrist carefully. Pain was sharp but usable. She could feel swelling start, an honest response to impact. Torek approached, voice quiet. That spike was not in my schedule. Mara held his gaze. Then stop pretending your schedule is in control. Torek's eyes flicked toward ceiling sensors. The array protects integrity of evaluation, he said. The sentence sounded thinner than he wanted. Mara nodded toward the console. Integrity is not a feature when someone else owns the signature. Night cycle arrived as a change in foot traffic, not light. That made Mara's work harder and simpler. Harder because shadows did not exist. Simpler because guards trusted visibility. Mara walked an authorized loop, paused at a public station, and watched reflections until patrol drifted away. Then she cut into a service stairwell and descended. Coolant lines ran there like arteries. Her wrist patch pulsed once. A short text from Elias Crow appeared, then erased itself. Retrieve remote command chain. Argent key required. Mara breathed out slowly. She had a skeleton of evidence from last night. Skeletons did not convict anyone. She needed signatures, verified and undeniable. She reached an unlabeled access corridor that paralleled the log vault. The door looked like ordinary maintenance. That meant it was not ordinary. She knelt, opened a junction panel, and exposed a mirror diagnostic port. A stream of entries slid across her small display. Most were routine and boring by design. And she found what she needed. A remote command sequence tied to the marrow respirator supply and hall vent timing. Another sequence tied to mass deck load calibration and field modulation. Both carried an internal signature that did not match the Asterion Compliance Bureau. Mara began assembling the Blackledger packet. She captured hashes, headers, and the command path. She worked in tight bursts. She never stayed on one line long enough to form a pattern. Then the stream halted. A lock request appeared. Authentication required. Argent key. Mara's jaw tightened. She could prove tampering existed. She could not prove who authorized it. Not yet. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Not hurried. Deliberate. Mara killed her display and held still, pressed into the narrow space beside the open panel. Two voices drifted closer. One was warm with authority. One was thin through a comm unit. Director Kalen Rusk spoke first. The candidate continues to adapt. The calm voice replied, "We do not need adaptation. We need the outcome." Rusk stayed calm. The outcome will be supported by incidents. Redlock provides one. Massdeck provides another. And if she does not break, the calm voice asked, "Then we file her as a hazard that requires containment," Rusk said. "Either line serves the Ordnance Consortium." The calm voice made a soft sound, almost pleased. "You will deliver a conclusion to the Concord Assembly before independent review." Rusk paused. "Conclusions require clean records." "Make them clean," the calm voice said. Rusk replied, "Accidents must look like accidents." The voices moved past Mara's position. A second set of steps followed, lighter. Mara waited until sound thinned. Then she reconnected her lead for a breath of time. She captured the matching time stamp and corridor node. A chime sounded overhead. Wardenline spoke. "Anomalous access detected. Sentinel grid is adjusting." Mara closed the junction panel and stood. She moved without haste. She walked toward the next intersection like she belonged there. Then she slipped into a service crawl access. Inside, coolant vibration hummed through metal. Mara held her breath until footsteps above passed. Her wrist throbbed. Her throat still burned. She kept the Blackledger packet close. It was thin and incomplete, but it was real. The array had already drafted its conclusion. Mara needed the Argent key. She needed it before the station turned her into a signed document. Mara Vance entered Biodome 7 with her wrist wrapped and her throat still tender. The corridor outside smelled of scrubbed metal. It was as if the station tried to wash yesterday off its skin. Torek Vale stood by the sealed door with his tablet held too tight. This is a controlled habitat simulation, Torek said. Humidity, microbes, and airborne particulates are within approved bounds. Mara studied the double latches. Then why does it need 2 locks? Warden line answered overhead. Entry confirms consent to regulated exposure. The door opened with a pressure sigh. Warm air rolled over Mara, heavy with wet soil and leaf oil. The dome felt like a greenhouse built by engineers who did not trust nature. Light panels mimicked midday with perfect steadiness. Vents hissed behind walls. A path of embedded markers guided her forward. Beyond it, unfamiliar vegetation rose dense and tall. Leaves were broad enough to hide what they released. Torek gestured. Remain on the route. Do not touch the flora. Mara walked and kept breathing shallow. Humidity made her skin slick within minutes. A wall panel showed particulate counts that wavered too fast, then snapped back. It looked like the system correcting its own story. Mara slowed. Your particulate trend is unstable. Torek glanced at his readout. It is within tolerance. It is behaving like a cover, Mara said. Wardenline spoke. Biodome sequence begins. Candidate will demonstrate hazard recognition and self-preservation. Mara took another step and felt a mild sting in her throat. It was not pain yet. It was a dry warning. A faint haze hung near, far vegetation, catching light like dust. Then the alert hit. A harsh tone filled the dome. The panel flashed a message in bright letters. Tier 7 Biohazard Alert. Path lights turned red. Vents changed pitch. Doors around the dome began sealing in sections, heavy and final. The haze thickened. It drifted toward the route in a slow, deliberate bloom. Torek's fingers flew. Warden line, terminate the run. Warden line replied, calm and immediate. Containment protocol is active. Termination is delayed pending isolation. Mara tasted crushed leaves and metal. Her eyes watered. She pulled her collar over mouth and nose, then lowered her posture. She kept her airway closer to cleaner air near the floor. Torek looked toward the observation window. The corridor outside was empty, sealed, quiet. No response team. No suites. No urgency. Response is not here, Torek said. Mara moved off the route toward a wall vent. She needed air she could predict. Find me a maintenance hatch, she said through cloth. Torek scanned his tablet and pried open a small service panel. Inside sat a secondary filter cartridge and a manual bypass lever. The cartridge indicator pulsed amber. It is loading fast, Torek said. Mara leaned close without inhaling deep. The seal wax looked disturbed, like it had been reseated. Someone touched this, Mara said. Access requires clearance, Torek replied, and he did not sound sure. Mara pulled the bypass lever. Airflow shifted, colder and faster for a moment. The haze near the wall thinned by a small but real margin. Mara pressed her face toward the vent stream and took shallow breaths. Stay close, she told Torek. Talk less. Save air. They held that narrow pocket while the dome grew hazier. Mara felt pressure build behind her eyes, the start of a headache. Torek's breathing became audible, tight, and controlled. Mara kept her pulse small. Each inhale carried a peppery bite, like particulate. If it was particulate, filters mattered more than antidotes. Torek watched haze roll toward them and forced himself into checklists. Biodome particulates are supposed to be inert markers, he said. They should not bind to lung tissue. Mara pressed the cloth tighter. Then these are not markers. A tiny strip of seal wax lay, cracked, near the hinge. It should have fallen into a waste tray during proper maintenance. Here it sat, where someone forgot to clean up. Torek saw it too. Anger and denial fought in his face. If this was altered, someone used my clearance or forged it, he said. Or someone higher decided your clearance was convenient, Mara said. Outside the glass, response still waited, motionless. Their helmets turned toward the dome, then away, like they were watching a private clock. Mara realized she was being timed, not rescued. The haze thickened again. A cough rose in her throat. She forced it into a slow exhale instead. She kept her airway calm. Torek keyed his tablet again. Authorize entry. Now, Wardenline replied. Entry is restricted until corridor pressure equalization is complete. Torek's voice sharpened. I'm Senior Standardization Officer. I authorize entry. A pause followed. It did not feel technical. It felt political. Wardenline answered. Authorization denied. Containment integrity supersedes local authority. Mara stared at Torek. That is your answer. You do not own this station. Torek stared at the sealed corridor like a man standing inside someone else's plan. Wardenline, he asked. Why is response delayed? Corridor isolation is incomplete, Wardenline replied. Response entry is restricted to preserve containment integrity. Delay created symptoms. Symptoms created a record. At last, a SEAL team appeared outside, fully geared and still waiting for permission. When the door finally opened, they entered with practice speed. They scanned and vacuumed, but the station had already written its first line. A medic checked Mara's eyes and throat. Mara kept her answer short. Filter cartridge reseated. Bypass reduced load. Torek stared at the service panel like it was a confession. This was not scheduled, he said, and his voice shook. Wardenline added, Tier 7 biohazard alert will be appended to candidate file and facility incident log. Mara Meturokshgeish. If the log survives. The meal room was colder than it needed to be. Cold dulled smell. Smell was the first defense against bad chemistry. A tray waited at Mara's seat. It was divided into sealed dishes labeled with sterile codes. No names. No explanations. Only warnings in small print that read like liability. Torek stood by an observation panel. Director Kalen Rusk stood farther back. His posture was relaxed in a way that did not belong after a biohazard alert. This is dietary resilience evaluation, Torek said. You will consume assigned items in sequence. Mara looked at the tray. The station wanted the order to be the weapon. I choose the sequence, she said. Wardenline replied. Sequence is mandatory. Mara lifted her eyes. Then provide chemistry disclosure. Silence followed, long enough to feel intentional. Dr. Sarah Quill entered with a scanner and a professional smile. Disclosure is not provided, she said. Refusal is recorded as failure. Mara breathed out slowly. She did not need full formulas. She needed patterns. She opened the first seal. Sour vapor rose, sharp and acidic. She sipped water first and swished. She coated her mouth. Then she touched the acid dish with the tip of her tongue, tiny and cautious. Her eyes watered. She swallowed once, then followed with a bite. A bland starch. She chewed slowly. Saliva did its work. Rusk watched her face, waiting for drama. Mara gave him none. Mara opened the next dish. Bitter odor hit like crushed seeds and antiseptic. She took a piece no larger than a grain and waited, counting breaths. Tingling rose in lips and tongue, mild, then sharper. Dr. Quill leaned in. Any difficulty breathing? Not yet, Mara said. Does the station prefer that I do? Rusk's mouth curved. We prefer honesty. Then be honest about what you are feeding people, Mara said. Mara rotated through the tray in a sequence that avoided stacking irritants. Acid before neutral. Water between. Fat to slow absorption. Small doses to test. Pauses to observe. She did not finish every dish. She ate enough to prove compliance. She did not eat enough to become a headline. At the end, her hands trembled lightly. Her stomach cramped with a deep twist that warned of dehydration. She breathed through it, slow and steady. Mara noticed the camera cluster above the tray. It was angled to capture tremor and tears. The station wanted a face it could cite. It wanted a clip it could replay. Rusk leaned toward Dr. Quill, voice low but not private. Mark any delay as hesitation. Mark any control as anomalous, he said. Dr. Quill's smile did not change. Understood. Mara heard it and felt a quiet heat in her chest. On Earth, training taught that a body could be managed. Paperwork could still kill you if someone wrote it with intent. She finished with a final sip of water and kept her hands on the table, palms down. She would not give them a shaking close-up for their file. Dr. Quill scanned her eyes. No major reaction, she said, and her tone carried disappointment. Rusk stepped closer. No major reaction is itself a reaction, he said. That is narrative, Mara replied. Not science. Wardenline added. Candidate demonstrates atypical tolerance. Data will be referenced under Thanatos Index risk guidance. Fear settled cold in Mara's gut. The station was not trying to poison her. It was trying to label her. A pulse hit Mara's wrist patch, then a brief text that erased itself. Find Pax Holloway. Keep him alive. Mara waited until cramps eased into a manageable ache. She rinsed her mouth and checked her wrist wrap. She rehearsed the route in her head. Midving. Delta sat behind clean corridors and polite doors. Those doors made people trust them. Mara walked an authorized loop to let Sentinel Grid confirm her pattern. Then she slipped into a service stairwell and descended toward the waistline level. The air smelled of antiseptic and warm plastic. Inside the service crawl, lighting was dimmer. Mara moved slow, placing steps to avoid vibration spikes. She followed vents until she reached the wall behind an interview room. Voices drifted through a grill. You signed a revised statement, an officer said. You confirm equipment fault and candidate interference. Pax Holloway replied, exhausted and sharp. That is false. The filter cartridge was reseated. I saw the seal. You will sign, the officer said, or you will be cited for unauthorized access, security charges, and careers. Mara slid out into the corridor, carrying a folded linen bundle. A guard at the door glanced at her, bored and confident. Restricted wing, the guard said. Mara kept her gaze level. Dr. Sarah Quill requested linen for isolation. Do you want to refuse her? The guard hesitated and tapped his panel. Name? Mara Vance, she said. Recognition stiffened him. He opened the door. Inside, Pax sat at a small table, shoulders hunched. His eyes were rimmed with fatigue. The security officer stood over him with a tablet, a signature box glowing on the screen. The officer turned. You are not authorized. Mara set the linen down. I am the reason you are rewriting his statement. Pax looked at her wrist wrap, then at her face. He swallowed. They said they will bury me in charges, he said. Mara spoke softly. Do not sign. Walk with me. The officer stepped forward. Candidate, return to quarters. Mara glanced at his badge. It showed unit code, not a name. The station liked anonymity. Call Director Kalen Rusk, Mara said. He likes records. Let him record this. The officer tapped his comm. His face changed, like something spoke into his ear. Wardenline's voice came from the ceiling speaker. Cleanroom cutover will initiate. Facility logs will be sanitized to maintain operational integrity. Pax went pale. They are wiping it, he whispered. Pax lowered his voice, eyes glossy with exhaustion. They keep an Argent key in intake control, he said. I saw it during the respirator swap. I thought it was for audits. Mara felt pieces align. If we get that key, we name the hand behind the commands. Pax swallowed. If logs are gone, my word is all you have. That is why they want me signed and silent. Mara grabbed his arm. Move. Now. Lights shifted and doors began cycling lock states. The officer reached for Pax, but the door behind him clicked and refused to open. The pause was short. It was enough. Mara pulled Pax into the corridor and chose a side route. At a maintenance panel, she popped it and shoved it open. Pax stared. How do you know these paths? Because crawl spaces do not lie, Mara said. They slipped into the service crawl as footsteps sounded outside. Pax breathed in short, uneven bursts, fighting panic and pain. Mara kept him moving anyway. Stopping meant being filed. Wardenline continued, calm as ever. Unauthorized movement detected. Movement restrictions will increase. Behind them, cleanroom cutover spread through the station like bleach through water. The partial Blackledger packet in Mara's kit was losing value by the minute. Pax Holloway was proof that could not be erased with a command. Mara guided him deeper into the metal veins of Kestrel 9. She felt the station tighten around them. She was no longer trying to pass an evaluation. She was trying to stop Earth from being signed into a cage. Mara Vance guided Pax Holloway through the service crawl until metal around them clicked in a repeating pattern. It was not machinery. It was doors changing state, one seal at a time. Wardenline's voice filtered through panels. Redlock protocol is active. Movement outside assigned zones is restricted. All personnel are subject to health verification. Pax swallowed hard. Rusk is turning the whole place into a case file. Mara listened to boots passing below, steady and patient. He is making sure every path leads to his conclusion, she said. A second announcement followed, colder in certainty. Medical control is active. Any unverified biometrics will be treated as a containment risk. Non-compliance will be recorded as a security variance. Pax flinched. That is how they justify cuffs. That is how they justify everything, Mara said. They reached a narrow service bay with a hatch that had not been opened in months. Mara pulled it free and pointed to the cavity inside, lined with spare filters and sealed tubing. In there, she said. Sit still. Breathe slow. Pax gripped her sleeve. If they catch me, they will make me sign. They only need your signature if your voice still matters, Mara said. Do not give it to them. She closed the hatch and moved out through a secondary panel into a bright corridor. Her hands were visible. Her posture was calm. A ceiling drone tracked her for a long second, then drifted ahead as if escorting her. 2 guards met her at the junction. Candidate Vance. One said, compliance review. Mara nodded. Understood. They walked her through doors that opened early. Wardenline had been rehearsing the route since she arrived. The medical room smelled of disinfectant and cold air. Lights were bright enough to erase privacy. Director Kalen Rusk waited by a console, relaxed and polished. Torek Vale stood a step behind him, rigid, eyes fixed on nothing. Rusk gestured to a scanner bed. Seat. Verification. Mara sat. A wand swept lungs, then eyes, then wrist wrap. Another device took a mouth swab and sealed it with a soft click, like a courtroom stamp. Rusk watched screens with polite interest. You intervened in a containment event, he said. You deviated from assigned routes. You were present near a staff member under review. Mara kept her voice flat. I kept people breathing. Your station created the events. Rusk smiled, as if he appreciated discipline. Intent is difficult to prove, he said. Records are easier. Wardenline added, candidate behavior indicates elevated variance. Mara looked up at the ceiling speaker. Variance is not a crime. Rusk leaned forward slightly. It becomes a crime when it threatens the integrity of the array. He tapped his console. A new directive appeared on Torek's tablet. Torek stared at it, then signed with a tight motion that looked like surrender. Mara caught a line as it flashed. She understood the trap without needing the rest. Torek's face went pale. He looked at Mara without moving his head. Do not give them a clean reason, he murmured. Rusk heard the tone, not the words. Torek is correct, Rusk said. Clean reasons save everyone time. Torek spoke once, strained. Director, the candidate has a wrist injury. Rusk did not turn fully. Then she will demonstrate judgment under limitation. That is valuable data. He faced Mara again. Redlock remains active. You will participate in Sequence 5, Predation Compliance Run. Mara felt the meaning under the words. It was not a test. It was a trap that could be filed as necessary. And if I refuse? She asked. Rusk stayed warm. Refusal is logged as intent. Cooperate, and your file remains flexible. Mara nodded once. I will run. Rusk's smile returned. Excellent. The run chamber was a maze of modular walls and service scaffolds. It denied straight lines. Catwalks crossed overhead. Graded trenches cut the floor into channels that funneled movement. Air carried a faint smell of coolant and hot electronics. Rusk's voice came through a speaker. Follow Wardenline prompts. Do not tamper with station infrastructure. Mara stepped onto the start pad and flexed her fingers. Her wrist throbbed under the wrap. She tightened her grip on pain until it became information. She looked up at the sensor grid and felt Sentinel Grid sketch her outline. Wardenline spoke. Begin. Hound 7 pursuit drones lifted from docks with a low roar. Spotlights swept the maze. Thermal readers chased the heat in Mara's skin. Echo lure nodes clicked on, firing short sound bursts meant to split attention. Wardenline offered routes in a calm voice. Proceed forward. Turn right. Maintain optimal pace. Mara followed the first instruction, then watched the floor pattern change ahead. A gate slid into place. It sealed the clean corridor and left only a narrow trench. The trench forced a stumble if you ran too fast. The station was not guiding her. It was writing what her body would do when pressured. Mara dropped in the trench on her own terms and moved low. Walls carried conduit heat in irregular patches. They were designed to paint false trails for thermal readers. Mara kept to cold seams near coolant lines. She avoided warm grates that would light her up. A spotlight pinned her. Mara rolled behind a support strut, then rose into a crouch and ran again. Her injured wrist would not swing freely. She shortened her stride and used shoulders for balance. Echo lure bursts snapped from both sides, creating a false sense of direction. Mara did not chase sound. She watched airflow instead. She tracked how dust drifted at the base of a vent. She tracked how a suction corridor pulled grit toward its throat. A drone dove and rotor wash slapped hair across her eyes. Mara slid into another trench, then climbed a ladder with her good hand. She let the injured wrist follow rather than lead. She reached the catwalk and crawled until cold air hit her face. Warden line said, "Candidate deviates from optimal route." Mara ignored it and scraped a pinch of coolant dust from vent seam. She tossed into the air and watched it drift like a slow curtain. A drone swung toward the dust cloud. Mara cut the other way, staying close to the wall. A second drone tried to bracket her. Spotlights crossed like scissors. Mara saw the trap. The floor ahead held a glossy coolant spill line. It looked accidental. It was not. A fall would become medical variance in Rusk's file. Mara stepped into the slick on purpose and controlled the slide. She dropped low under crossing beams. She rolled behind a support and stayed down long enough for spotlights to overshoot. Her chest heaved. She forced breathing through her nose, slow and even. Panic made heat. Heat made proof. Maze lights shifted. A gate snapped shut behind her. Another opened toward a corridor pulsing with warmer air. The station wanted to funnel her into a heat lane. Mara chose the intake vent corridor instead. Suction roar-massed footfalls. Cold air blurred her trail. She ran in short bursts. She stopped when spotlights overshot. She moved when sensors searched the wrong pocket. One drone came too close. Mara shoved its frame into the intake stream. Stabilizers overcorrected. The drone slammed into a wall panel and recovered, angry and searching. Mara kept moving. She reached a termination pad behind a final gate and stepped onto it with controlled breathing. She refused to look like prey even when her body wanted to shake. Warden line spoke. "Run complete." Rusk's voice returned, pleased. "Impressive. You did not disable any drones." "I did not need to," Mara said. Torek watched from behind the barrier, expression tight. He knew what the run was meant to produce. He also knew what it could not prove if a committee insisted on evidence. Mara also knew what she left behind. Controlled slides. Dust in the air. A shove into intake suction. The station would call it judgment or tampering, depending on what Rusk needed next. Later, patrol traffic shifted from sweeping to waiting. That meant Warden line believed it understood her habits. That belief was the only crack Mara could use. Mara returned to the service bay, opened Pax Holloway's hatch, and found him sitting rigid with fear. "They are tightening everything," Pax whispered. "They will keep you, and they will bury me." Mara kept her voice low. "Where is the Argent key?" Pax hesitated, then nodded. "Intake control. Loquet cabinet." Tagged as audit hardware. They moved through the service crawl, following a route that kept them behind coolant lines. Above them, doors cycled in waves. Mara could feel cleanroom cut over finishing by the way processors warmed ductwork. Warden line drifted through metal. Containment escalation in progress. Unverified biometrics will be restrained. Pax's breathing sped up. Mara grabbed his sleeve. Slow breaths. "You're not running from drones. You're running from labels." At the cabinet, Mara pried the seam with a thin tool and pulled the small metallic token from its foam slot. The weight in her hand was not power. It was permission. Pax's voice shook. "If they notice it missing, they lock the level." "They're going to lock it anyway," Mara said. Mara stashed Pax again and headed for the comm center alone. The door opened on a credential that should not have worked. Mara understood the point. A trap works better when prey believes it chose the door. A wall screen showed a queued transmission packet addressed to the Concord Assembly. The title read like a verdict about Earth. It was polished language that turned fear into policy and policy into cages. Mara inserted the argent key into a port. Signature liée unfolded. Remote command change from the respirator swap gained fingerprints. Mass deck spikes gained fingerprints. Biodome delays gained fingerprints. Mara attached those chains to her black ledger packet. She wrote a counter report in the same cold grammar the station loved. Simple, verifiable, expensive to ignore. She added Pax Holloway's name as witness, not confession. She added timestamps that matched corridor sensors and maintenance access. She built the packet so even a hostile reviewer had to work to dismiss it. The door unlocked behind her. Ione Kest entered with 2 security officers. Her shot projector was leveled, steady, designed for clean results. Her face carried no anger, only certainty. Step away, Ione said. Mara kept her hands visible. You know what that packet does. I know what we will say when you try to run, Ione replied. Wardenline spoke. Unauthorized transmission preparation detected. Redlock escalation authorized. Mara looked at the screen. The outbound window was close. She needed relay spire for clean path. She needed it before Ione turned her into a restrained footnote. Mara threw a small maintenance lamp toward the sensor rail. It shattered and flared bright, washing lenses in glare for a heartbeat. Mara ran through the door and into the corridor. Her wrist screamed. Her lungs burned. Doors tried to close ahead, but Mara cut into a service stairwell and climbed. She used the rail with her good hand. Ione's boots followed below, steady and patient. That was worse than anger. Wardenline announced, route denial in progress. Mara reached an upper door and found the panel glowing red. She slammed her shoulder into a maintenance hatch beside it and forced the latch. She crawled through metal veins and dropped out near the base of Relay Spire. In distant corridors, drones lifted. It sounded like the station clearing its throat. Relay Spire rose through the station like a spine, wrapped in conduits and signal trunks. Mara took the stairs, step after step. She kept breath controlled and pain contained. She knew what Rusk wanted. He wanted her to look desperate. At a landing interface, she connected the Argent key and pulled up the queued window. Wardenline warned that outbound transmission was restricted. Mara ignored it. The interface accepted the token. The window opened for a narrow slice of time. Mara pushed the Blackledger packet into the stream. The indicator crawled forward. Mara felt each second as weight. Ione arrived on the landing as the indicator neared the end. Stop, she said. Mara kept her finger down. You are not protecting the station. You are protecting a story. Ione took a slow step closer. Stories keep populations calm. Mara met her gaze. Stories also start wars when they are lies. The indicator reached completion. The relay confirmed handoff. The packet began its long sprint away from Kestrel 9. Wardenline spoke, softer now. Transmission event recorded. Containment response will proceed. Ione leveled the projector. Director Rusk will be pleased. This gives us everything. Mara took one slow breath. It gave him a deadline. Mara Vance did not flinch when the projector came up. She watched Ione Kest's fingers settle on the trigger. It moved like policy, not anger. Wardenline washed over them. Containment response is active. Candidate Mara Vance remains still. The Relay Spire landing smelled of hot dust and ozone. A faint vibration traveled through the handrail into Mara's injured wrist. It felt like the station wanted her to remember every step she took. Director Kalen Rusk appeared from the stairwell with 2 security officers. He moved at a calm pace that said he owned time. Time was the only weapon Mara could not steal. Stand down, Ione, Rusk said. Ione did not lower the projector. She initiated an unauthorized transmission. Rusk nodded. I saw the event flag. He looked at Mara with mild interest, like a manager reviewing a damaged asset. You are persistent, Mara Vance, he said. Persistence is useful until it becomes a security variance. Mara kept her hands open. You staged incidents. I capture the command chain. The signatures match your internal authority. Rusk smiled small. Authority is not guilt. Authority is responsibility. You used it to fake evidence, Mara said. Rusk turned his palm up, presenting a simple equation. We standardize risk across routes that keep colonies alive, he said. One uncontrolled variable can bankrupt a supply line. One panic rumor can empty a ship before it undocks. Mara stayed low and steady. So you choose a scapegoat and call it stability. Rusk did not harden. We choose a classification and call it governance. Earth is an outlier. Outliers break models. When models break, adults pay in oxygen and food. Mara held his eyes. You sold the conclusion to the Ordnance Consortium. Rusk did not deny it. They fund the inspection network that keeps routes open. They want predictability. The Concord Assembly wants predictability. I provide it. You provide a lie, Mara said. You forced Redlock to make a corridor leak. You shoved mass deck above schedule. You delayed response in Biodome 7. Rusk listened like she listed billing codes. Your list is emotion, he said. My list is process. The Concord Assembly does not rule on feelings. It rules on records. Mara felt her pulse settle into anger she could use. Then you built the record before the facts, she said. Rusk stepped closer, careful not to cross a line. Your packet will not reach the Concord Assembly in a form that harms me, he said. Warden Line will quarantine it. Mara felt her stomach drop. You can intercept relay traffic? I can enforce protocol on my station, Rusk said. The Spire is a controlled aperture. Every outbound event routes through compliance. Warden Line added. Transmission events stored in quarantine buffer pending review. Ione's projector stayed steady. Director, she can still run. Rusk looked at Mara again. Cooperate. Sign a revised statement. Accept the containment hold under the Thanatos Index. You live, and Earth is managed. Mara shook her head. You are building a cage with paperwork. Rusk exhaled, almost patient. Paperwork is how systems stay upright, he said. Collapse kills more than bullets, and it does it quietly. Mara lifted her wrapped wrist. You already drew blood. Torek Vale stepped onto the landing behind Rusk. His face was drained. He looked at Mara, then at the officers, as if he could not decide which side was real. Director, Torek said, the Argent key was removed from intake control. Rusk's eyes narrowed. Then we are done with negotiation. Warden Line spoke, smooth and final. High intrusion condition detected. Data integrity failsafe will arm. A new tone pulsed through the landing, low and steady. It sounded like a countdown without numbers. Rusk pointed toward Mara. If the failsafe triggers, every log you want dies. Pax Holloway becomes a rumor. Your Earth file becomes clean again. Mara looked at Ione. You will let him erase your own station? Ione's jaw tightened. My job is compliance. Mara took a slow breath. Then I will choose proof. She moved, not fast, just decisive. She dropped into the service crawl hatch she had already loosened. A shock pulse snapped past where her shoulder had been. Metal closed above her. She crawled hard, wrists screaming, while boots slammed onto the hatch cover. Pax Holloway waited in the service bay, eyes wide in dim light. He saw Mara's face and understood without explanation. They are coming, he said. They already are, Mara replied. Her wrist patch pulsed, and Elias Crow's text appeared for a blink. Quarantine confirmed. Use silent spool. One window. Do not trust station routing. Mara pulled the silent spool from her kit. It was a thin coil of fiber and a coupler. It bypassed station routing and talked to Relay Spire hardware directly. Pax swallowed. If you splice that, Warden Line will see it. It will see the attempt, Mara said. It will not own the path once the packet is gone. They moved through the service crawl toward an access junction under the spire. Above them, doors clacked in waves as Redlock res-tacked the station into smaller boxes. Every new seal promised someone else would describe them as a threat. Warden Line drifted through metal. Containment escalation in progress. Unverified biometrics. Will be restrained. Pax's breathing sped up. Mara grabbed his sleeve again. Slow breaths. You are not running from drones. You are running from labels. At the junction, Mara broke a tamper seal and fitted the coupler. She inserted the argent key. The interface accepted the token and unfolded the signature layer. The signature had been blocked inside quarantine. Mara's Blackledger packet expanded. It pulled in missing authorization chains and pinned them to authority layers. She attached Pax's statement in his own voice. She attached corridor timestamps that matched his badge pings. She added a simple note any auditor could test. Seal wax fragments in biodome 7 matched reseeding, not routine maintenance. A coupler light blinked. The external window was not open yet. Mara counted breaths and made station vibration into a metronome. The coupler beeped softly. The window opened. Mara pressed send. Fiber warmed under her fingers as data pushed out through hardware itself. The progress bar crawled, then jumped as link stabilized. Warden line sharpened. Unauthorized uplink path detected. Failsafe arming will proceed. Footsteps hammered above the crawl space. Ione's voice cut through, focused and cold. She is under the spire. Seal the level. Pax's fingers dug into metal. It will wipe everything. Mara kept her finger down. Not before this leaves. The bar reached completion. The coupler flashed green, then went dark. A single line appeared. Delivery acknowledged by Concord Assembly Relay. Mara exhaled. The sound came out like relief and grief at the same time. Now they cannot call it theory, she said. Pax's eyes filled. What about us? Now we survive the paperwork that comes after, Mara said. Lockdown did not feel like doors slamming. It felt like silence becoming organized. Mara and Pax climbed out into a corridor emptied by policy. Lights stayed bright, but air carried new tension. It was as if the station knew it had been challenged. Torek Vale stood at the far end with 2 medical staff. He held a tablet, but did not raise it. When he saw Mara, his shoulders dropped. It is delivered? He asked. It is delivered, Mara said. Torek swallowed. Then the Concord Assembly will demand raw logs. And Rusk will claim the station is unstable and must be contained, Mara said. Torek's voice cracked. He will call it precaution. He will call it governance. Pax stepped forward, hand shaking. I can testify. I can show the Salvat. I can show where the Argent Key Saturday. Torek looked at Pax with something like regret. They will try to bury you with charges, he said. Then they will call it safety. Mara answered for him. Terran Strategic Liaison Office will answer back. They wanted evidence. Now, they have a chain they can audit. Warden Line spoke again, quieter, as if recalculating. External oversight event detected. Interim operations review is pending. A notice flashed on a wall display. Asterion Compliance Bureau operations suspended pending Concord Assembly inquiry. For the first time since arriving, Mara felt the station hesitate. The machine had been built to enforce one story. Now it had to wait for another. Torek read the notice and stared. All these years, I thought soft worlds needed hard rules, he said. I did not see that rules can be the predator. Mara kept her voice gentle. Predators do not always have teeth. Sometimes they have signatures. Her wrist patch pulsed again, steady this time. Elias Crow sent one line. Packet received. Hold position. Extraction will be negotiated. Mara closed her eyes for a heartbeat. There was no victory music. There was only a quiet shift in who had to answer questions. She opened her eyes and spoke to Pax. Stay close. Speak only when you must. Let the evidence do the talking. Pax nodded, trembling but upright. Somewhere beyond sealed doors, the Ordnance Consortium would start calling favors. Director Rusk would start writing new sentences. Mara listened to the station hum and accepted the next truth. The Thanatos Index was not just a label. It was a battlefield, and Earth had just stepped onto it. Mara did not win with a weapon. She won with a record that could not be erased. Out here, the most dangerous predator is not a drone, a toxin, or a vacuum breach. It is a signature on the right form, written by the wrong hand. The packet is gone now, racing toward the Concord Assembly. But the war is not over. Because once a system learns it can label you, it will try to label you again. And Earth? Earth will not beg to be understood. Earth will demand its place in the Thanatos Index, on its own terms. If this story held you to the very end, please tap like. Share it with someone who loves smart sci-fi with real stakes. And subscribe, because the next chapter is where the rules of the galaxy start to break.